Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to our webinar on how accountants can automate accounts payable for your construction clients. My name is Nick Levine. I'm a chartered accountant and fintech consultant. Let's kick off today by introducing our star-studded panel. We've got Graham Morrison, Director at Empowered. Graham, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, as Nick says, I'm Graham from Empowered by Cloud. I'm a director with the company. We specialize in construction and trades companies and have done for the last 3 or 4 years, focused around zero platform. Over the years, I've run construction businesses and been finance directors in construction property companies and logistics businesses. So got a lot of experience in the construction sector.
Thank you, Graham. Second guest today, and also a practitioner with a lot of experience in the construction sector, Ariana Barakatai, CEO of Majors Accounts. Ariana, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. As Nick said, my name is Ariana. I'm the Managing Director, CEO of Majors Accounts. It's a small family-run practice based in Southeast London. We've been going for about 17 years, and over the years we've developed a kind of specialism in construction. It's still not the majority of our client base, so we do have clients in all fields, but we have over a third in construction, and we've dealt with kind of all areas within construction, whether professionals or contractors, subcontractors. And I also do property development on the side myself, so I understand from my client's point of view as well the whole process of how it works, and I've got a real passion working with construction companies and seeing what we can do with them.
Thanks, Ariana. Great to have that holistic perspective from you today. And our final guest today, more from the product vendor side, we've got Alex Kesselman, product engineer and solutions engineer at Approval Max. Alex, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nick, for having me here. As you said, my name is Alex. I'm a solutions engineer at Approval Max. I've been at this role for the past 5 years already. And my main goal is to understand what are the challenges our customers are facing and to find the best possible solution, to find the best tools that can fit to their business needs. So yeah, thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Alex. So I think just to start off by getting a feel for who our audience is, you guys for joining us today, we're going to start off with a couple of polls which are going to flash up any second. So the first poll is, what type of business do you work for? You've got about a minute to answer this. So it's either I work in an accounting or bookkeeping firm and have construction clients, I work in a construction business, in an industry, or other. So it looks like the bulk is accountants or bookkeepers serving the construction sector, which I think that poll's almost closed. Looks like around 60% audience work in accounting or bookkeeping practice, serving construction clients, 10% in a construction business, and 30% other. So that's really helpful. Gives us a feel of who is joining us today. I think we're just going to wait a couple more. Just 1 or 2 people haven't voted. Just going to wait a couple more seconds on that. Okay, so that's that poll, and then the second question, second poll we're going to look at now is, what are your main challenges in the construction sector? That should pop up any second. What are your main challenges in the construction sector? Late payments, day-to-day compliance finance processes, new legislation such as need to comply with the construction industry scheme, lack of automation and tools, or other. And again, we're just going to keep that open just for about a minute. These are all things we are going to talk about in the main body of the content as well, which is good to get a feel.
From the product side, I already like the distribution that the major one would be a lack of automation and tools. All right, that is something that I'll be talking about today.
Late payments, the evergreen topic that never goes away, especially with subcontractors in the construction sector. Right, so we're just going to keep that open for a few more seconds, but based on how it currently stands, late payments looks to be the main issue. Oh, sorry, lack of automation tools. Very relevant for you, Alex, 69%, followed by late payments, 54%. I guess lack of automation tools probably affects a lot of these. There's a lot of crossover with the other subtopics. So yeah, okay. So thanks for answering those questions. Okay, we're just going to move on to the next slide. So this is just a quick overview of what the agenda is today. We've got the, sorry, I'm waiting for that to pop up again any second, sorry. I think, sorry, I think, so the screen, okay, so welcome introductions we've just covered. And then in terms of the different sections of the content, topic 1 is going to be all around growth opportunities. Then we're looking at accounts payable challenges in the construction sector for accounting and bookkeeping firms servicing those client base, and then best practice tech stack for construction clients, followed by Q&A. So just before diving into that first section on growth opportunities, just wanted to give a little bit of sort of context where we are today in 2023. Construction sector in the UK obviously had a very tricky time during the pandemic when it was put on hold, but it's once again now experiencing rapid growth in the UK, estimated to be worth $386 billion in 2023, and therefore it's not surprising the industry is an attractive one for accounting firms to focus on just because due to its sheer size. That said, not without its challenges. Compared to other industries, more affected by late payments than others. Again, that was a topic that flashed up in terms of challenges. In particular, due to reliance on subcontractors, there's many layers of hands payments waiting to get their way through to different projects from different subcontractors that are taking on different parts of the project themselves. The starkness of this is really highlighted by 4,165 construction firms becoming insolvent in the UK in the 12 months to 31st of March 2023. And so today we're going to be looking at how to use automation tools, including AP, to overcome these challenges and grow or establish a client base in the construction sector. In regard to the questions, I say we are going to have a Q&A at the end, but if you do have, if you think of your questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the questions box. And if it's sort of relevant within the flow of conversation, I might be able to drop those in as well. Also, in terms of the poll, we will have a couple other polls at the end as well. Right, so in terms of kicking off the first topic, growth opportunities, I guess this being relevant both to accounting and bookkeeping firms already servicing construction clients, or those looking at to service that sector for the first time. Ariane, I think we'd kick off with you if that's okay. I mean, what in terms of your experience in the construction sector, why is it such a great area for accountants to focus on?
I think, to be honest, as an industry as a whole, the work that's involved from our side as accountants is not really that difficult. There is an education piece there for the clients, and this is an industry which does not use as much technology as it could. So they're kind of ready there for us to mold and grow with them and teach them kind of along the way what they need to be doing, whether it's how records are kept, how they can take on subcontractors and how they should be verifying them, you know, the difference between an employee and self-employed individual. So there is so much there for us to be able to provide value to. And personally, I think it's a great kind of industry where you can see there's that tangible product there that they've created. You know, they've taken a project from scratch and you've seen how they've grown and what they've learned throughout it, and you know, helping them to tender for bigger projects. Yeah, for us, I just see it as a great opportunity for.
It's really, the point that's really interesting. Are you saying that you think perhaps there's a stark difference between accounting and bookkeeping firms that work with this client base, those that have automated their processes and those that haven't? It sounds like from what you're saying is there might be a lot of firms out there that have got decent portfolios of construction clients, but are perhaps lagging a bit behind because they haven't put a lot of these tools in place. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, I think so. And especially compared to other industries who may be used to using technology anyway, I think this industry is quite averse to using tech and seeing how it can, or being demonstrated, you know, to how it can help. So there is that opportunity there for us to do a lot.
Great, thanks, Ariana. Graham, have you got any comments to add to that in terms of why it's such a great, why is construction such a great area to go after?
Yeah, I mean, from an accountancy perspective, as Ariana said, that, you know, it generally is lower tech adoption in most other industries, and it also has sort of, you know, construction specific legislation average owner up. So it gives an opportunity for accountants to show their skill set and make life easier for an owner in the industry. If you think about it, a lot of the SMEs that are in this sector are generally accidental business owners. They would have started up, you know, in a van, a tool bag, going about doing some small trades and grew their business, and then all of a sudden they're running, you know, a squad of guys and paperwork's everywhere, so that it's ripe for getting more process put into it, more understanding of what they have to comply with, and getting on, you know, for us just to make their life easier. Ultimately, you know, that type of individual just wants to be on site, on tools, running projects. They don't want to be worrying about whether they've got a receipt for something they paid for at B&Q 3 months ago. So if you can take care of all that part of the business and take all that back office stuff away, it makes a massive difference to them as individuals and makes them a bit easier.
Is the phrase that people need to be business owners should be working in the business rather than on the business? Is that right? Or was it the other way around? I'm never sure.
Well, they're 100% in the business all the time.
Yeah. No. What I mean is that it's actually on the actual, rather than their own administration side, actually working on those actual projects and growing them. And it's actually interesting because I guess going back to Ariona's point, but Graham, one for you, I guess in terms of advice for accountants and bookkeepers seeking to target construction sector first time, the vibe that I'm getting is if you're already using sort of applying that automation first approach and mindset, it sounds like that if you're going to go after this market the first time, that's something to wear unashamedly. Would you agree with that, or do you have other perhaps key piece of advice for existing firms that haven't yet targeted this sector that would like to?
So I'll take that. The way
sorry, Ariana, if you want to start, yeah.
Sorry, the way that we kind of take on when we take on clients, even new ones now who come to us without any idea, to be honest, of what they should be doing, and maybe haven't worked as closely with an accountant they would have had in the past. I think it's really important to work closely with the construction client. So initially, it's having those conversations, talking about what are we going to do, how are we going to set everything up, making sure they understand that we're going to communicate a lot more often than maybe they're used to. Because one thing with the construction is you can't just leave them to their own devices and expect, you know, to speak to them in a few months' time or later down the year. You need to have that regular contact, because a lot could have changed throughout a project. For example, they may have taken loads more subcontractors. You know, there's so many things that we need to be aware of. So making sure that they're okay with speaking to their accountants as often as possible, getting them on the apps. Initially, there will be a lot of resistance every time we take on a new construction client, because they're not used to it. You know, they're used to the old, even when they go to a suppliers, they will get a paper invoice. Not many of them have signed up with proper accounts, and they'll see their invoices listed on the accounts with supplier statements, stuff like that. They don't look at it. They'll get the receipt, shove it into the van, and probably never see it again. And if they do find it somewhere, they will probably take that as a bag to the accountant. So kind of showing them the importance of keeping up to date with the paperwork and having that regular channel of discussion with us, and then kind of seeing, based on the conversations you have, you see what it is that you need to help them with, and you'll learn about that particular client more and more, and you'll see where they need that help, and then you can really make a difference to them.
Thanks, Ariana. So it sounds like what we're saying is almost that expectation management on both sides. If you don't have those regular touch points, you're not going to be able to do as good a job, and I guess that's going to be frustrating for you to do the chasing and eating to maybe.
For both parties, we've had clients who've said, no, I don't want that communication, and actually we get to the point where they've gone so far down the line, and what can we do to assist at this point? It's going to be a lot of headache for them to fix it, and then they will think that we've done something wrong because they have not taken the appropriate steps, for example, taken on subcontractors, not verified them, not deducted the correct amount of tax. So that's why they need us every step of the way. But yeah, anyone who doesn't want that, to be honest, I prefer to say, thanks so much, but we can't work with you, because they will get to a point where they're unhappy when we give them a large unexpected tax figure.
But do you have those? I mean, have you had any situations where you've had those conversations with new clients at the beginning and you've had to almost say, guys, maybe this isn't right, or that hasn't happened yet?
Absolutely. In the first meeting that we have with clients, we tell them this is the way that we work, and if this is not going to be right for you, then we may as well either not continue now, or if we do decide to go ahead, then after the first 3 months we'll review. And if we're not working in the way that we expected, then we would prefer to say, sorry, but it's not going to work out for us, because both parties will be frustrated and we won't get anything out of it.
I think that's it. Sorry, I'm just going to say, I think Ariona makes a really good point. If you are targeting this market, you should really understand what type of construction client you're looking for, and what type of service you're providing.
Yeah.
So you don't, we are similar in that we'll be contacting clients daily, weekly, to keep up to date with everything, making sure, if there's any changes to projects, or if there's anything that needs to be filed, it's all up to date. We've got all the paperwork and all the rest of it. If the client's not willing to participate in that level of interaction, it makes our job impossible. And we do have to just turn around and say, look, thanks. If you just want somebody to do a set of year-end accounts, and you walk in with a bag full of receipts, that's not us. We've got a different offering. So I would say that's one thing. You need to have a real clear understanding of what service you're offering and what type of clients you want to work with, and stick to your guns on that. I would also say, which Ariona touched on as well, should have a good understanding of the differences in the construction industry, whether it's CIS, whether it's DRC, whether it's retentions, whether it's the fact you're working with applications for payments, which we maybe come on to a bit later, and why there's delays and slow payers historically. There's a whole terminology that you need to understand as you step into the construction sector. Otherwise, it could cause your client a lot of problems and yourself a lot of problems. So, and then the final thing is, I think you should really have a passion for the sector. I used to love watching buildings come out from the foundations all the way up, get topped off and finished, and tenants and everything move in. I used to love watching the progress of that, and coming along, from standing in the mud to standing in reception. So I think you need that sort of passion to go in. It's not something you can just dip in and out of and do half-heartedly. You're either in it or you're out, or you're not.
And in terms of your Graham, on your point, in terms of the complexities and the different types of entities, sole traders in the sector, would you say that is there like a good entry point, that if this is something you think you do want to be committed to and learn and grow your client base, is there a particular entry point you'd recommend, or is it not work like that?
I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I can tell you what we do, and that's just what we've found works for us. So we would tend to only work with clients who want to grow. Limited companies, we don't work with sole traders. We also tend to work from a turnover point of view, from companies that are doing between 1 million to 10 million. We would only necessarily take under 1 million if they were fast growing, or their expectation was they were going to be fast growing. Because if you're doing that high touch all the time and somebody's only doing a few 100,000, it's not really cost effective for them, and we're always trying, we can't provide the service we want to provide, so it doesn't really work for what we do. So, and then over 10 million, generally, they're starting to take finance in-house. So as a virtual finance offering, a lot of what they want to do is going more in-house over the 10 million mark. So the sort of sweet spot for us, I would say, would be between sort of 4 and 7. But that's just the way we've set ourselves up.
So you go with them on that journey until they get to that.
Yeah.
If they.
Yeah. So I mean, once they go over the 10, we tend to still work with them on an advisory front, sort of, non-exec finance director, strategy work, forecast, and all the rest of it. But we tend to drop out of doing the day-to-day bookkeeping and filing of returns because they tend to take that in-house.
Great, thanks, Graham. I think just bringing Alex into the conversation now, the point about coming on to sort of technology and automation tools. And I guess it's interesting, Graham, the point that you make about you'd only touch clients of a certain size because from a touch point and profitability perspective, that has implications. I mean, Alex, how could automation tools lead to, well, can automation tools lead to greater profitability with construction clients? And if so, how, if you could give an example or two, that'd be great.
Sure, absolutely. Well, when we think about the different models, how we can scale the business, one way would be whenever you have a preferred app stack already built into your business, then you can just easily replicate it to a new venture that comes into your accounting business. That's why, like in most cases, and as we see from the lots of customers, not only from the construction side, but pretty much a lot of them outside, they really don't care about what tools you'll be using internally. Mainly, their main goal is to actually seek for the solution for their challenges. So it's now your decision, rather you would like to allocate a bigger team and they will be involved in their redundant business process and try to understand whatever happens over there and trying to work with that, or you will actually allocate the preferred apps that you're using and that your team already knows how to deal with, and you can just allocate resources towards that, and you'll have one single source of truth where you will be actually doing all of your work. And with that scalable business model, you can then add it to another customer, and so on. So you can really take away all of those. Well, some of these customers, they're never going to be your clients. Those who are very redundant, those who are very resistant towards the technology. But some others who are willing to grow, who are willing to understand what you're trying to say and what tools you're trying to bring, you will have a much better client base, and it will be much easier for you to scale your business with these tools and with these customers.
That's really interesting. So what you're basically saying is the first one is what automation can allow you to do for construction clients alongside those in other sectors is you can have a set of, once you have a particular set of processes that you can automate for your construction clients, you can then replicate that across all your client base. But the key thing that you're saying is, and I guess this comes back to what Ariane was saying a few minutes ago, is your client base has to show willing as well, because I guess presumably from an automation perspective, there still has to be some touch points if it's making, submissions, for example. So you still have to have that consider that human element as well, right?
Absolutely. Well, the human element is actually a crucial part of the whole thing. If we'll think about the whole process, we'll notice that there's a lot of routine tasks that can be easily automated, but still you cannot take a human out of this equation. A human will be the last point of truth who will be overviewing what's happening.
It's simple as approving a transaction to get paid, for example, right?
Exactly. And just comparing if the request that they received or the document that they're approving right now is actually legit. So the human, we cannot really take away that from the equation. It has to be over there. It has to be a point of truth. But what we can do, we can take away all of these routine and error-prone tasks from the whole equation, and we can just easily outsource that to the automation tools. And that will help you because pretty much we're already using all kind of different automation tools. Excel itself is also an automation tool. But with more complex businesses, there's much more complex challenges, and much more complex automation tools can help you dealing with those challenges.
Great, thank you, Alex. And we're going to talk a bit more about technology as we go in further on into the conversation. Moving on to the second topic now, which is around accounts payable challenges. And there's a whole variety of reasons why this is relevant for the construction sector, whether late payments, which we're going to chat about, or CIS. I mean, Ariane, again, one for you. Why is accounts payable such a critical area to focus on for construction clients? Is it due to the subcontractors, would you say?
Subcontractors are, it's similar to what Graham touched upon earlier. There are so many layers within a construction project. Obviously, you've got the contractor who will take on a subcontractor to do the work. That subcontractor will then take on their own subcontractors who are specialists in different fields, because one project has needs the skill of so many different tradesmen and specialists. So it's layer after layer. And generally the contractor will take on a quantity surveyor who will come and price up the job, even though a construction company may say, right, we know we've done X amount of work up until this point. The surveyor will come along and say, well, actually, we don't agree. We think it's this. So there's that delay there of back and forth of, no, we think it's this, and no, you haven't done this amount of work. And then when they finally agree, there's a whole time period which has lapsed before anyone was paid. Then once that payment has gone through, it will go through to the subcontractor. They will then need to do similar things with their subcontractors. So there's such kind of a long chain of people there that needs to be paid, and the delay starts at the top, which is what causes a lot of the late payments in the industry.
I guess that's just going off the assumption is that even when there's clarity that someone does need to be paid, that's just assuming that people, from the human element, people are going to be paid on time rather than putting it off till next week just because of human nature.
Has added to it.
There's a whole other, a whole other thing, in terms of payments being due and actually then paying those individual companies. And in terms of the CIS scheme, Graham, do you think that's a contributor? And perhaps if some of the audience maybe aren't working in construction yet, if they're not familiar with that, can you give us an overview of CIS? That'd be handy as well.
Yeah, so I mean, CIS, Construction Industry Scheme, it was ultimately brought in because construction was notorious as a cash paid business. Obviously, that's not the case now because we don't do that. But if you go way back 80s and 90s, the HMRC felt they were missing out on a lot of effectively PAYE tax or the equivalent of it. So they decided that they would start deducting a proportion or put the onus on contractors to deduct a proportion of the labour element of any invoice that was put in. So ultimately, if your gross status, it means the deduction is zero, so you get everything paid in full. If you're registered but not gross status, you get a 20% deduction, and if you're not registered, you get an automatic 30% deduction in all your labour. Now, ultimately, you get it back through PAYE if you're big enough. But you could have subcontractors and stuff working for you, and then and going back to what Ariana was saying, you have this whole cascade effect of deductions and refunds and all the rest of it working through it. Ultimately, if a business is in trouble, the first place they go to try and borrow money, if they can't get it from the bank, is HMRC. So they'll stop paying PAYE, they'll stop paying VAT, they'll stop paying CIS and all these sort of things. So some of these companies are using the money that's been deducted, or would have been using the money that's been deducted, because there's also domestic reverse charge that's in play now as well, to fund them through tight periods. So that's now going direct to HMRC, which obviously they're wanting to avoid any loss of revenue, but it's putting cash pressure on the smaller businesses. And as Ariana was saying, if you've got 3, 4 or 5 layers in the supply chain, you could be on 60 or 90 days payment by the time you've got going. So you're 3 months in the hole and you haven't received any money. So there's a lot of factors that can really impact on there, and that's before you get into a dispute that gets bumped to the final account, the last payment on there, and negotiations there, or them coming back and asking for main contractor discount. That's another classic. It's ultimately main contractor's profit.
And does that, I appreciate it sounds pretty complex stuff. I mean, from an accounts payable, does that make accounts payable even more of a challenge, or does it not affect that piece of the finance?
It does affect accounts payable if you're not registered. So
yeah,
there's a lot of back and forward trying to verify subcontractors, because to be in the scheme, you have to verify with HMRC that your subcontractor's in the scheme.
Yes, yeah, so there'll be some there's the time element that some sort of identifies.
So if there's a problem with it, it's bouncing around and need different information, and so straight away you're putting delays into that payment process. And I guess the other thing is, the bigger the company, the more notorious they are to say, well, we only run one payment a month, so if you miss it, you miss it. That's not uncommon to say, you've missed this payment run, we'll put it on next month's. That's a lot,
Great, thanks, Graham. I think this really gets into some of the nitty gritty now in terms of. I appreciate you and Ariana. We're both using a core accounting software tool for your client base, whether they be the likes of Xero or QuickBooks. And in terms of being agnostic with vendors, I think, Graham, I think we discussed this previously on a previous catch up, that it's managing the accounts payable for construction clients, because it is so fiddly for the sector. Core accounting software vendors have, I think, have their own sort of limitations. I mean, what's your experience of that? Presumably, we're going to come and talk about Approval Max in a bit, but I take it you have to use third-party tools to do this efficiently. Is that fair?
I think, I mean, at the end of the day, Xero or QBO, QuickBooks Online, are trying to appeal to the widest possible market possible. So they're generic. So they're good at doing the accounting, the process, and they're brilliant. You'll go through the system from an invoice or a supplier bill all the way through to getting it paid. However, once you start adding the complexities of the construction industry, applications for payments, not getting what you applied for, all this sort of stuff, they start to creak, because that's not what they're specifically built for. So at that point, you're looking at alternatives that you can add in. I mean, ultimately, what you're trying to do is build a mini ERP rather than putting a SAP or a Microsoft Dynamics in that will cost hundreds of thousands. You're trying to use apps that are available in that environment to enhance what you've got and make your life easier.
Thanks, Graham. I think this comes back to what Alex was saying before, that once you've established that for your client base, and again, we're looking through the construction lens today, you built that little tech stack for accounts payable amongst other processes specific for that sector. You can then seek to replicate that through other clients in that space. I mean, coming on to talking about Approval Max specifically, which Alex, I mean, how from an accounts payable perspective, how can Approval Max provide a better level of support for managing the complexities of around accounts payable for construction clients?
Sure, absolutely. That's actually a very good question. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that I'm completely agree with what just Graham said about the initial business model behind Xero or QuickBooks Online. They were never designed to support everything that you have on the accounting side. So you have already a platform allowing hundreds and thousands of businesses around the world to start using the cloud accounting. But in order to support all kinds of business activities, you need to involve the ecosystem that they've built around that. By the way, not only the Xero and QuickBooks Online, but also lots of these huge ERP systems like NetSuite, like Dynamics, they're also building the ecosystem behind that, because they understand the power of third-party tools, third-party developers that knows what are the pain points of the customers, and they can build specific solutions just to handle that particular challenge they're having. So within Approval Max, if we're talking about the construction industry side, well, we can take a look on the different standpoints, different checkpoints. What Approval Max, in the essence, we are a platform for financial controls. Automation is just a part of it. It's just the mechanics behind it. So whenever a customer wants to create some different checkpoints, let's say whenever they're raising purchase orders and they want to see if the goods were actually received, they can do that within the platform itself. And they can build an automation process where all these raised purchase orders will go through delegation of authority. Everyone who's supposed to make their approval decision will see that on time and will make their approvals on time. Same goes from the other side of the spectrum. Whenever we already received supplier invoice and we want to make sure that it's being matched against the original PO, that is also possible within the platform. And that's also adding additional checkpoint within the whole financial control system. And now we have different places where we can put different, let's say, green lights or red lights. On budgets, you can bring all of your budgets from Xero and allow your decision makers to see what's in there and how does budgets compares against the request they're approving. Same goes for the PO side, for the sales invoice side, bill approval side, and so much more.
Great, thank you, Alex. And Graham, from your own, because I know you're an Approval Max user, it'd be great to hear from your own perspective, how do you use approval maps within your own accounts payable processes for your construction clients?
So for the construction clients, I mean, ultimately, so we use Xero. I know I want to use a QuickBooks, so she might be able to comment on the access in there. But for Xero, the approval process is really basic. You know, it comes in as a draft, it goes to awaiting approval, it goes to awaiting payment, and then it gets paid. That's it. And you can't lock down what people see beyond that. So if you've got project managers, you've got site agents, you've got contracts managers who want to see invoices relating to their projects, or from specific suppliers, you can't do that within Xero. And you also can't limit what invoices they see. So they either see everything or they see nothing. So where Approval Max comes in really handy and is very powerful to use is it can restrict what individuals see only to what they need to see to do their job. So you can put in, you know, if you go back, you would have a financial approval matrix. You know, the site manager can approve up to £1,000. Project manager or the contracts manager can approve up to £10,000. Then it has to go to managing director or whatever that process is going to be. So you can build that within Approval Max so that you have the layers of approval that you need, and then it gets pushed back in to Xero for its onward journey. It also, you don't need access to Xero to use Approval Max or your accounting software. I'll spread it up, but we use it specifically with Xero. So you can use it a lot. You know, you can invite pretty much the entire company in to raising purchase orders, approving invoices, but only what they're authorized to do. So you've got a lot more control on that because you've got a lot more flexibility in how you can build it.
Right. It sounds like from a financial control point of view, but I guess also in terms of cutting out a lot of the noise for your client base just by seeing what is relevant to those specific individuals.
And also, sorry, Nick, I was going to say, and also cutting out all the paperwork. So I worked as an FD getting back 15 odd years ago, and we used to put all the supplier invoices into A4 lever arch files and send them out to all the managers, right? And we had occasions, one of the locations was about 40 miles away, so we used to throw it in back of some of the trucks to go down, and you'd lose a lever arch file of supplier invoices. It's gone. So you just had to wait until the suppliers phoned you up asking for payment and say, oh, we don't have it, can you send me a copy? So, you know, all that hassle, all that trying to keep control of it, all that trying to chase managers, have you approved this invoice? It goes online. I think the other thing which Iona and I were discussing before was, that said, you should have a real good look at the process you're running and try and make that efficient before you automate it. Because automating a bad process is still a bad process.
I'm going to come on to that. Save that. We're going to come on to that in.
All right, I'll put it away. I'll leave it for it. I'm sure it was her like.
So just to cross-tick this bit off, presumably it must be handy to have that audit trail as, sorry, if this is all going online, if everyone go back and question who approved what, you've got from using Approval Max, you have the audit trail as well from an approver's perspective. I think that's helpful as well, right?
Yeah, and you've got mobile apps, so you can do it on your phone, you can do it on emails, you can do it on web browsers. So there's a lot of flexibility about where you can actually do it.
Just wanted to make an example. One of our recent customers, it's from Australia, but it's in that case, it doesn't really matter. So that's a construction company. They're managing different properties across Australia, and their teams, the development teams who is on the project, they typically don't have any access to their laptop, and they simply cannot order quickly whatever they need, materials and so on. So they just use our mobile app to raise all the purchase orders, submit it for approval, and instantly it goes to all the relevant team members in the head office. Once it's approved, they now have an agreement. They have already commitment that they can go and purchase all of these materials. So they're not wasting their time waiting for the head office to actually respond. It's all happens in just seconds.
It keeps business moving, and what you're saying is if they're on the construction site or whatever, it doesn't matter. If you've got that accessibility through mobile apps, then keeps business moving. And in terms of the third topic we're moving on to now, this is actually around best practice tech stacks for construction clients. And actually, Graham, you were just touching on this before. I know automation is not just a magic, and technology is not a magic wand that you can wave. It is really important to consider your underlying manual processes first. Can you talk about why that's really important before seeking technology solutions to help streamline those processes?
I think that's, I mean, as I say, Ariana, what's going on about that, so it's maybe one for her to pick up on.
Yeah, I think for us, what we do initially is it's important to understand how a client works. Although we can create a process which can be replicated across the entire industry, there are some which work in different, more specialized areas. So it's important to understand how they work, and then find the best solution and process to ensure that we fit it around their business, so they are more willing to kind of use the tools that we give them which matches their process, so they don't have to change too much in what they're doing, but also at the same time gives us the information that we need. Because if we do just give them a standard, right, we need you to do this, it may not work for them, and they're not going to adopt it, and we don't get anywhere with that. So it is important to understand how they work and then work around that.
But have you got any examples of construction clients that perhaps you might have you might have certain processes that you automate through technology, but you've had to maybe adjust those particular client based on either their way of working or a particular complexity to do with their construction business?
Yeah, I mean, there are some clients who do use some of their own apps for, let's say, job costing or something like that, so which doesn't necessarily fit in our standard app stack. So it's just seeing how we can incorporate that to get the information we need within that process that is more specialized for what they use. But just to give an example, with clients who do kind of, they're adverse to the tech and even adopting it in the first place, and don't forget, a lot of these use subcontractors who may work on many projects at the same time and not necessarily for the same contractor. So trying to get them to use technology it's quite difficult, because they won't know which project are they working on, do I upload this for this job or that job, but it's just important kind of working with them. What we've done is we've actually gone onto site and shown all the subcontractors that they have, what they need to do, how they need to work. It's not something that we do often, but for the bigger clients, it's made a difference in how we work with them.
That's really interesting. So you're saying you need, and again, this is one of the nuances of the construction sector, that because the subcontractor element, it's not just how you could have a client that could be really adept and willing to use technology and have that constant communication, but they might work with a number of subcontractor suppliers that are perhaps less willing, and that can create friction points from what you're saying, potentially.
Yeah, massively, especially if they're using a lot of them. You're not having to convince just one, because the owner may be willing, but the subcontractors say, no, I don't want to do it. And we had one client had 160 subcontractors. These are all individuals doing their own thing. So you've got to convince 160 people to get on board with this. But I think what worked for us is once the client saw how much of a difference it made for them in one, having visibility of what's going on, because they didn't before. Everyone was just doing their own thing, handing in paperwork whenever they could remember, and they didn't know what was being spent, where anybody was at any one time. But when they saw the difference it could make, then they put it as a condition of the subcontractor working with them. So they kind of turned the tables a little bit in how they work.
You have to use, they would have to use a certain tool to process their invoices, for example. Interesting.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Ariana. And I think it'd be really good now to, in terms of Graham and Ariana, your sort of your own tech stacks for construction clients. I mean, Ariana, let's have a conversation with you. We're already chatting to you in this context. What is your sort of tech? And presumably, I guess what you're saying is you might have some construction clients that perhaps come to you already using one or two tools that you don't already use that you have to incorporate. But in terms of your perfect, if you had full control of the tech stack for your construction clients, what is in your tech stack construction clients if they have to adopt exclusively the tools you tell them to use?
Yeah.
I'll let everyone-
Sorry, did you want me to go or do you want Graham to start?
Eric,
Crack
Eric,
on,
let's
everyone.
start. But Graham, as I wanted a question to both of you. Let's stick with Ariana. I want to hear Graham's thoughts
Sure.
as well.
So unless the client has their own kind of app, maybe for raising invoices or just getting kind of job costing, then what we will start off with is Dex. So that's a huge one to make sure we've got all the information in place and coming through. So we connect with the suppliers, with the subcontractors, with the team that they may have, if they have a finance team in place. So everything goes into one place. And then we connect that up with QuickBooks to ensure that we've got all of that information in there, with invoices. If we can get them to raise invoices on QuickBooks, we will do that, because it will be a lot easier for us. Then we've got everything in one place and we can kind of see exactly what's going on. And then if they want us to help with actual payment process, or making the payments ourselves, then we will add apps like Teleroo, for example, into that. That's more the client facing side. Obviously, counting wise, there's a whole host of other things that go within that, but we start off, I don't like to give them too many things so they don't get overwhelmed essentially by it, but that's kind of our most basic one to start our clients on.
And we've just come back quickly onto the payments, to appreciate that has complexities at risk. Is that, what proportion of your construction clients are engaged with you for payments, or is it more of a...
That's a work in progress. There aren't so many. One, because of the issue regarding, you know, they're not sure how much access we have to the bank. So some will think that we have full access to their bank account and we can pay whatever we want, you know. But that's an education piece on our side. As we start to have more of those conversations and bring that client on that journey with us, the last step is payments, and it makes sense. We'll try it out with just a few, just to show them how it works, and over time they will then give us more and more to allow us to do that. And it means that, one, we're paying everything correctly, because as we've seen with especially the construction sector, they will pay anything here, there and everywhere, and they don't know what they have paid and what they haven't. But it's a slow process to get them to trust how we would work and what access we have to making those payments.
And so what you're saying is the payments is something, it's a relatively new service line, but also you have to go on that journey with clients rather than offering construction clients off the bat.
Yeah.
Great. Sorry, Ona. Graham, it'd be great to hear your tech stack for your construction clients. And again, it's more, I guess, in an ideal world, because I appreciate you may have some that come to you that want you to incorporate one or two tools that aren't necessarily your preference, but you have to use them right.
So we're generally running the finance department for a lot of these clients. So we have a defined stack for that, right?
Yeah.
And it's very similar to what Ariana went through. So we'll have Dex for collating supplier invoices, making sure that we've got information, trying to avoid duplicates, etc., and get moving away from chasing paper. That'll be connected up to, we use Xero rather than QuickBooks Online, so we're the blue team rather than the green team. So that'll push into Xero. I guess ultimately you've got some input automation tools which would fall into Dex. We occasionally use Pleo for some clients, and we have Approval Max as well to help the approval process of invoices going through the system. On the payment side, once it's been approved, we use Teleroo. Now, Teleroo is good from the point of view that we don't make the final payment, we just set up the run, and then it goes through an approval process as well. So there's a kind of double check from the approval of the invoice to the approval of payment. And then you've got, I'll come back to job costing in a minute, because that's the only one that starts to become a bit more client specific rather than what we dictate. And then on the output side, we've got Float for short-term cash flow forecasting and Spotlight for kind of board pack reporting. Job costing is always an interesting one. we can dictate everything that I just spoke before about, because it's the finance function that we're running. So we use our software to run their finance function. And it's quite easy for us to dictate it because very few people in the company are accessing a lot of it. Where it starts to become more of a discussion in terms of what's best suited for the business is when it comes to project management and job costing. And that's because much more of the operational people are involved in those systems. And you've got variations in the types of business you're running. It may be a professional service company, it may be, you know, a joiner, an electrician, it may be a main contractor, it may be a builder. So there's different requirements at different stages throughout the supply chain there. So the types of things that we'll use would be Simpro or Procure, live costs. We on smaller ones that have only got a few guys might use Zero Projects, which is obviously the projects ones that got project module within Zero. And then there's some legacy things sitting around Workflow Max. Obviously, it's been well discontinued from June next year. Not sure what Blue Rock are going to provide in terms of their version of Workflow Max, which is due out at the start of the year. So there's still some discussion on legacy systems. Do we wait and find out what Blue Rock are doing, or do we move them to some of the other systems that we're using? But the only one that we tend to have we're not firm in terms of an app stack would be on the job costing side, because that is an integral part of the operations of the business, whereas the finance function we're controlling, so we can control the stack.
I mean, do you think that perhaps with the core vendors, whether that be Xero, QuickBooks, Sage, similar, that do you think that's something from a connectivity point of view? I appreciate we were saying before that these tools aren't necessarily built to be sector specific for construction, but do you think from an integrations perspective, could that be done better, or do you think that's it's more just not as simple as that?
I think everything can be done better, but it just depends how much more you want. As we touched on earlier, Xero, QuickBooks Online, generally standalone accounting systems are there to do the accounting piece really well, and that's why you've got an eco environment with all these apps to help with it. I always feel, and I think one of the reasons Workflow Max was discontinued is its work with some of the other apps like Dext and Xero could have been a lot better. So hopefully Blue Rock will solve that. But there is a piece around you want your accounting software to be the center of information gathering and the one piece of truth. But sometimes the bigger job costing systems are using it as, we've done all this over here, and now we'll put it into the account system. So it just depends how much information you want across and when you want it.
I guess it's down to construction companies come in so many different shades. You're never going to get that perfect thing that fits all of those companies. And I think in terms of the gaps piece, Ariana, it'd be good to hear your take on this from a technology workflow perspective for your construction clients. Is there anything that you think that technology is perhaps not fulfilling, that's still a little bit manual or fiddly, that can be like improved, or do you feel like you've got that perfect tech stack now for that client, for the construction clients?
I think something that is still manual. So as I mentioned, we're a QuickBooks only firm. They do have projects within that, but one of the issues we have is when we're in a meeting with a client, it could be a quarterly management meeting, just talking about how everything's going, how a project is going. They could have 3-4 projects going on at the same time. But when they go to buy things at the suppliers, they will buy in bulk because obviously it'll be cheaper for them. For us, then it's difficult to figure out what was purchased for which project. And there aren't really, controls on the client side to be able to show which was for which, or they have to do it manually themselves. So they will have a spreadsheet. We have a client who has a spreadsheet who breaks that down. But if there was a way to automate that and not have to have these big spreadsheets still, that can automatically, from one invoice, split that into different projects. So when we do look at the viability of the success of projects, we can say, well, this particular one is doing great. This one, have a look at it. There's something going wrong. You're not getting the profitability there, or you know, the costs involved are way too high compared to a similar project you may have done. So what could be going wrong and things like that. We can't give that much level of detail, or as much as we'd like, as easily as we'd like. There is a lot of manual work that goes into that, versus, let's say, other industries where it is quite straightforward. So I think that's one thing that I would love, if there was the ability to be able to break that down and automate it. It would make a huge difference in how we work with the clients, but also our clients to see how their projects are doing and what's viable.
Yeah, I guess from the profitability side, if you're not allocating, it's not just the time saving. I guess if you're not allocating that correctly, how can you give good, I say good advice on the viability piece? Could really skew the how projects seem to be performing. Thanks, Ariel. I think again, in terms of the audience today, it'd be good to switch it and move on to the next poll in terms of just to see what apps own your own construction tech stack. So that's going to pop up in a few seconds, hopefully. Right, so we have the core vendors, Xero and QuickBooks, and then in terms of those sort of add-ons, Approval Max, Dex, Teleroo, and Float. So those add-ons, they're all products used by Ariona and Graham. So wow, 100 so far. Is it 100% Xero? Let's see if that changes.
All right, come across, Ariana.
Yeah, Graham and Ariona, are you on? I think you're restricted from answering this, aren't you? If we're panelists. And I think we've got a few more seconds on that. Interesting that it's Xero 82%, QuickBooks 27%. So there must be some practitioners here that use both of those, if that's more than 100%. Great. I think we're just going to be ending. Okay, so that's been okay. We finished that poll. So that's Xero 82%, followed by Dex 73%. Great, and we have almost 20% that use Approval Max. So good to see some Approval Max users on the webinar as well. And then we're going to do one more poll, last poll for today, which is for the 80% of people that don't use Approval Max. Are you interested in learning more about Approval Max? So that should pop up again in a couple of seconds. I think so. Colleague working behind the scenes. Here we go. Yeah. Are you interested in learning more about Approval Max? Yes or no?
Be interesting. I was gonna just pick up. I think someone put in the chat regarding integrations between Teleroo and QBO. There currently isn't a direct integration, so it is a CSV upload, but that is something that they're hopefully working on at the moment to get that put in place to streamline that a little bit.
Great. Actually, I need to go, so I'm trying to toggle to the questions. Here we go. On Q&A. Oh, so we've got a couple of minutes still for questions. So feel free to drop them into the chat box if you have any. And Ariona, thanks for that. So does Teleroo integrate with QBO? So did you just say that's on the product roadmap in the near future? Is that what you just?
I'm hoping that is something they're working on right now.
Fingers crossed.
From what I've seen, from what I've seen right
Yeah.
now, it's under beta feature. You can already export the data from QBO and import that into Teleroo. So it's not like you have a handshake method automatically sending all of the payments straight into QBO. But that again is just doing two things to import that into Teleroo.
It's better than manually writing it, so, which is something.
And Graham, for Xero, have you got that? Does Xero have that functionality already for integration with Teleroo?
There's an API link, so it's just a direct link.
Right. Right. Any more questions? Speak now or forever be silent. We have about a minute to go, so now is your moment. No. Okay, well, look, thank you everyone for joining today on a Friday, which I know is not the easiest day, so I'm really great turnout. Thanks for our brilliant panelists, Alex, Ariona, and Graham. If you'd like to learn more about Approval Max and how it can sort of help the construction sector, I actually wrote a blog post which was published a few weeks ago, so that's online or somewhere on the Approval Max website. Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great weekend and see you all soon.
Thank you very much. And I'll be happy to show you one-on-one demo. So feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye.